Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have a very special guest today, David Griffith. He is former CEO, chairman, executive director, and head coach of both for-profit and nonprofits. We will have fun going through David's bio today and discuss about a bunch of social, economical, and entrepreneurial topics. David is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania right now. We had a nice pre-convo leading to that, and I'm hoping that we will have another good one today. And precisely, he's been chairman at Modern Group, still is, and chairperson of the board of trustees at the Academy of Natural Science, and a bunch of other organizations, which we're going to talk. For example, I see here that Drexel University is a trustee there. He's also an author at the Wear Muddy Boots blog. We're going to discuss about that and about David's passion for fishing, which I guess a nice relief for the brain after so much work. And obviously, the most important topic today would be how to help communities, in David's case, in the Philly area, on thriving through entrepreneurship, hopefully, because that's my vibe, that's my passion right there. Really had to have Dave on today. This podcast is brought to you by potbuyer.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to a podcast like this one. Podcasts are amazing to meet great people like David, talk with them, pick their brain, and network with them. You can grow your network, but also your net worth with podcasts, because you can generate leads, clients for your business. Podcasts are quite amazing. So podbuyer.com, if you want to start, scale, be invited to podcast. David, welcome to the pod. Can you tell me a bit more about yourself and about what you're up to nowadays?
Sure, Charles. Thanks for the invite, and good to be with you. As we discussed when we met earlier, I started my career at IBM as a systems engineer and switched to sales and moved up through the ranks. Wound up running marketing, and then was recruited over to MCI. I ran marketing on the business side, and then my wife and I had moved quite a bit. And of course, we've got a plane going over here. My wife and I decided to stop moving. I had an opportunity to buy a business in Philadelphia, which I did. Modern Group, industrial holding company. Ran that for a number of years. Wound up selling it to the ESOP to the employees. I remained chairman there. When I turned 60, 10 years ago, I decided to make room for the guys coming in back of me. And I got drafted to run a nonprofit in Philadelphia by the name of Episcopal Community Services, or ECS. Very old, 150-year plus organization. I was the first non-priest, non-social worker to run it. And we've had a great run, went through a lot of transformation. I am in the process of laying that down. We've gone through a succession plan. My successor is on board. I'm involved with a number of nonprofits. I'm also involved with a number of for-profits as either a board chair or as a lead director. 2 kids, both married, a couple of grandkids. I've been married for 45 years to the boss. And one very active Westie, and who's sleeping right next to me here. So she may join us on the call, but that's all good. So that's kind of a real quick run through of where I've been and what I've done.
Yeah, you had a very long and successful career. What were the highlights and what were the insights from those highlights for younger people?
Great question, and I'm going to draft right off my blog. The blog now, we had to rename it because we had to switch providers, but it's the Muddy Boots blog, and it's really comes from a lesson very, very, very early on when I first became a manager. And the advice from my dad was, look, you don't sit behind a desk. You don't, now I would say, you don't sit behind your phone or your terminal. You go out into the field, you put your boots on, you get them muddy, and you meet with customers, you meet with clients, you meet with employees, and you ask two questions. One, how are you doing? How are we doing? And then the second question is, what can we do better? And you listen with real intentionality, clarifying questions. And I have over the years added to that one other question, and that is particularly for folks who are dealing with customers. And I steal the quote from Mike Marks, who's a good friend, very prominent consultant in distribution industry. And he had a quote that I love. It says, "Find the pain and fix it," which really goes back to, what can we do better? Where's your pain? And I don't think we do as good a job as listening as we need to as either sales folks, frankly, as executives. I never had an office. I always sat in the bullpen. Loved to wander around. Loved talking with young people, mentoring. And what I've concluded is that if I've done my job right, I'm the dumbest guy in the organization when I leave. It makes no sense to hire really bright people and then tell them what to do. So that would be my advice.
That's a long story short. Very good. On your side nowadays, you're focused on the economic development side of things. What problems do you see in your community, and what potential solutions could exist to fix them? Well,
look, Philadelphia, where ECS headquartered, is the highest level of poverty of any major city in America. And frankly, the way they measure poverty is not terribly correct. It really ought to be around living wage. But let's say close to 35% of the population in Philly lives below that bar. Poverty level would be probably 22-23%. So poverty is something that will consume us. We are a consumer society. It's 70% of the thing, and it is a huge cause of social unrest. It is a huge cause of injustice. It is, frankly, motivated by racial inequity and barrier inequity. And so our whole point at ECS was to take a look at ways to move the needle on poverty. And we concluded very quickly that many agencies maintain people. We wanted to focus on transformation. So we went out and we found a methodology that was based on brain science, based on a coaching model, hence my title of head coach. And the issue was very simply, when the brain is in crisis, which is what poverty is, cognitive function is damn near zero. And when cognitive function is zero, your ability to problem solve is zero. And it just feeds on itself. What we learned and what we found from working with some pretty sophisticated partners is that by coaching, setting goals, small at first, and then growing them, cognitive function improves, problem-solving ability improves. And so we built a case management system around that principle, and we added savings match, because the way we believe out of poverty is a job at a living wage with benefits and assets in the bank. And so our program really aimed to create that. Now, that's not going to handle everybody. You have behavioral health issues, you have addiction issues, and there are agencies who do that very, very well. So we partner with them. But about 65-70% of the population is working. Well, actually, most people in poverty are working. They're just working at minimum wage jobs. So we really want to help people move up the food chain. We look at housing issues, we look at financial literacy, we look at education, job readiness, job training, and either we provide those services or we partner with best of breed. So that focus and that methodology is shown to be about 85% effective over a 5-year period. And that's way, way, way better than traditional case management. So that's been our focus. I think poverty is the #1 issue we face in the nation. The environment is right in back of that. Often the people who are most affected by poverty are also most affected by the impact of climate change. And recent news would certainly be some great examples of that worldwide.
So I had various folks on this podcast talk about the definition of poverty, and yes, it comes back to poor decision making. It's almost if the frontal lobe was cut off, and life and success, I think, yes, is about making good decisions. In my case, let's say that I'm accurate on 90% of my decisions as a guy that has been practicing this skill for a decade plus. Most people make 70%, and let's say that in poverty you make very low amount of good decisions, 20%, 30%, for example, drinking alcohol, eating fast foods, not exercising, being a poor partner, not looking for another job. Is it also accurate to say that energy is a problem in poverty, that you don't have the energy to pretty much do anything and get out of the hole? You're just so, first, I think you're somewhat trained like a Pavlov dog that, you need to do this and not get out. And second, I think you don't have the energy to fetch some more, or the ambition, that fire in your heart. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, you and I are not going to agree. What you just described is the prevailing perception of poverty in America. And to be blunt, it's blatantly untrue. There are certainly people with addictions. There are certainly people with mental health issues that adversely impact their ability to be employed. They don't have resources. The #1 issue is access to opportunity and having the skills to be able to exercise that opportunity to earn a living wage and go from there. Most of the people I know in poverty, and I've spent over the last 10 years, I've literally met thousands, are some of the most resilient, hardworking people I know. But because of circumstances, because of lack of training, lack of access to opportunity for a lot of reasons, most folks I know are working 2-3 jobs. The problem, they're $7, $8, $9 an hour. They're scrambling like crazy, and they're doing everything they can just to exist, which is exhausting. And again, they're in crisis. And again, when you're in crisis, it's very, very hard to lay out and execute a game plan to move you forward. The root cause of poverty is to be blunt, lack of access to opportunity. Now, that has many root causes. A lot of poverty that we see are people in the 3rd, 4th, 5th generation. I'll never forget a young man who thought there was only one college in America. And he had never been more than 5 blocks from where he was born. And therefore, you do whatever you got to do to survive. And there's a whole bunch of corollaries there. Don't underestimate the addiction and the behavioral health issues, and some of those get created by circumstances. But for a large part of the population in poverty, and by the way, there's more rural poverty than there is city poverty. It's not a black-white issue, although certainly there are racial overtones. It is, and significant racial overtones. It is about the lack of access to opportunity. So how do you get education? How do you provide access to opportunities? How do you get transportation? How do you get decent medical care? And how do you give people the wherewithal and the ability to pull themselves up? It's about access to those opportunities. So you have crisis management, but you also have to have fundamental coaching and training. It's why workforce development is incredibly important. And frankly, it's in business's best interest to hire and pay people at a living wage. If you look at what the social safety net costs in America, it's staggering. You could lower corporate taxes over time that would allow them to pay living wage without really adversely impacting profitability. And over time, you could lower the taxes they pay because the social safety net is staggeringly expensive. Now, that's not a simple solution. That's not an overnight solution, but it is a strategic solution, because if the 35% of the population that's living in poverty wasn't, you'd have 35% more active consumers in America. And as a consumer deal, I mean, that has profound implications. Forget the cost of social unrest, forget the dignity that is taken away from people when they live in poverty. You know, and they're again, I mean, it is a very, very complex, tough issue, but it's not because people are lazy. It's not because people don't want to work. And I mean, there's a lot of urban myths on poverty, and I don't mean to snap back at you that hard, but a lot of my major donors who have never even been in the inner city and seen it have all these urban myths and people are lazy, they're on welfare. You know, I wish I got a free cell phone. Those are all, to be blunt, ignorant comments.
Yeah, just to be clear, that's not what I said, you know, like I didn't say lazy or anything. I said energy, and I think we're fully aligned. Listening to your last comments, energy meaning that they have 3 jobs, right? And these jobs are not paying quite burnout. A lot. Yeah, and they just don't have time and energy. Time is equal to energy and or money and resource to get out of that pervasive pattern. So
you're rate crisis.
Yeah, so it's somewhat
that's fair. Hard. And I and again, I don't mean to snap back so hard, but
no, it's okay.
Energy is, well, I've dedicated a lifetime to addressing environmental and the issues of poverty. It's just, there's a lot of people who have tremendous, you know, look, it's the famous quote, right? A lot of people were born on third base and thought they hit a triple. That's the folks in intergenerational poverty is the dead opposite of that.
Yeah, I see it, you know, like the movie Batman, when he's like in the hole. To get out of the hole, you need huge energy, you know, and it could be a similar analogy to pushing the boulder up a hill in entrepreneurship. You need to struggle for quite a while and deploy humongous quantities of energy to get the ball rolling by itself, you know. So I do think I can think of various solutions, but let's start with this Wi-Fi and the internet. Do you feel that, for example, in rural community, this can bring quality and a great quantity of information to folks, which can broaden their horizons, make them smarter, and be able to get out of that? If we think of Wikipedia, for example, that's how I get to sleep nowadays. I go down into deep wiki rabbit holes. So let's say that I read about Wall Street, then I see Lehman Brothers. I'm going to read about Lehman Brothers. If I read about Lehman Brothers, I might read about macroeconomy after that. And I get very educated on a topic in a very short amount of time. So do you think the access to the internet can help with that? I spoke with a guy 2 weeks ago that is installing broadband in rural communities. So what do you think about that?
Well, look, I think access to accurate information, and I'm going to emphasize accurate, is incredibly important giving people the online online access to behavioral health has changed the game. Telehealth and access for rural communities changed the game. What is the challenge I think we face as a society, not just in the US, but overall, is the staggering amount of misinformation that is out there. Now, I'm a huge fan of free speech. I'm absolutely not suggesting censorship, but let's look at the COVID and vaccines and the issues around vaccines, just as one simple example. There is the science. There is certainly a wide range of opinions. And even the good scientists will tell you that, yeah, there are some side effects on a vaccine. But if you look at, the percentage risk versus the overall benefit, it was pretty clear that the right vaccines had a profound impact. I mean, the data is pretty conclusive. There's so much other information out there that unless you are an informed consumer, it's really, really easy to go down rat holes. So I think internet is an incredibly powerful tool. I think AI is going to be phenomenal. I remember in my early days at IBM, I was working on an alternative access in the early days. Never in my wildest dreams did I see the full path that it could go. So it's profound. I mean, we pivoted to virtual education. I'm not a fan of virtual education. I think there's a combo, but we were able to pivot 850 kids to a school program in a week. Comcast did a phenomenal job providing technology, providing broadband, and not necessarily perfect, but it was amazing what they did. We've got a ways to go to catch up from the epidemic. I see it now in Drexel in the freshman class and their ability to get to be sophomores, math, science, some of the fundamentals. So, there's got to be a combination, but I think it is an incredibly important tool. I also think you got to have, and, we know, equal access is also important. You can't have it all lumped in one player who can decide what can and can't be, available. So, I mean, it's a very complex deal, but obviously a powerful tool. Look, in the early days of long distance, you strung wire. Now in Africa, it's almost all internet, it's all satellite, it's all towers. And it's a hell of a lot more reliable than what we had in America with Sandy and, all the examples. So, I mean, it made available information in a way that's extraordinary.
In Mexico, there's a lot of entrepreneurs selling elotes in the streets, or they have their taco place. They're very small business, micro businesses, and most of them barely survive, They barely make it with I don't know, $15, $20 a day sometimes. It's really rare for them to constantly generate a profit that can be reinvested into something perennial. My next question is entrepreneurship. Can it become a black hole which you can never escape from when you're on the lower end of thing? Let's say that you're not about education, you're just about, I can't work for anyone else, so I'm gonna work for myself, and I'm gonna buy my bike, gonna buy my elote stands, and I'm gonna go sell corn on cob basically every day, and probably bring back home 10 or 15 CAD or USD to feed the family, and hit that on repeat, and hopefully put children to school. That will be 15 to 20 years of my life, and some days I'll either injure myself or I'll get sick, and then my whole family will be put in danger of not having money. The question is like, is that like because we see lots of entrepreneurship nowadays in the Black community, the Latino community in the US. I see it here in Mexico, but sometimes when I look at some entrepreneurs, I'm like, this is probably not the best decision. Getting a job is not either, but I think it can be a whole. How can we make sure that it is not a whole and it is, this thing in my case that's fueling me, that's making me grow up every day, and that's ensuring some perenniality, if that's even a word, for my whole life.
Well, Charles, that's a really insightful observation, because the reason they may be entrepreneurs is because there aren't any other jobs. And so rather than lay down and die, they're going to do what they got to do to take care of their family or themselves. We address in Philadelphia, I can't speak to Mexico or the third world. I don't have a lot of experience in creating jobs there, but the way we address that in Philadelphia is a program called Scaling Up. We partnered with the Economy League, and we offered fundamental skills, finance, strategic planning, compliance, market analysis. We have a program right now to address 100 Black and brown startup businesses, and to get them the information, provide mentorships and coaching, so that as they start the business, they don't step on the landmines that you described. Access to capital is incredibly hard, and right now with the interest rate environment, it's gotten a boatload harder. But there are lots of organizations who have the ability to, provide working capital, provide startup, and if you have mentors and people who are willing to coach, you can really take and make a difference in those communities. Now, that's in a large urban US city. I can't speak to rural, but these programs are starting to be models for across the US, where there are a lot of the large banks have specific funds they've laid out for entrepreneurial development, for Black and brown businesses, and to overcome, frankly, a lack of opportunity, and it's time for catch up. Very, very appropriate, but you're absolutely right. There's a lot of gotchas in starting a business. One of the things I enjoy is sitting down. I mentor 2 small businesses right now. I meet with them on a regular basis. We kind of go through 101. I provide them access to other suppliers, open doors. That is incredibly easy for me to do, given background and who I am, and frankly my upbringing. Clearly privileged, and I just think there's got to be instilled in the American system the willingness to give back, and the willingness to mentor, and the willingness to recognize that more people working not on the social safety net is in our collective best interest. Nobody loves social. It's staggeringly expensive. By the way, it's not dignity. I come out of a tradition that says we respect the dignity of every human being. I take that very, very seriously, and the people who do the work that I do, we take it really, really seriously. And what I'm loving seeing is that business is starting to recognize that that's got to be. I believe there's 6 stakeholders in every business, not shareholders. Shareholders, employees, their families, vendors, suppliers, customers, and the community. And the community aspect of that is it's in your best interest to have a thriving community. Henry Ford was no dummy. He says, I have to pay my way. Ironic today, given the news last night with the strikes, but I need to pay my workers enough that they can buy my cars. That's a entrepreneur, but very enlightened that, profit is nice, but in order to have profit, I have to have consumers. So how do we create, it's in our best interest to create thriving, vibrant consumer communities. And individual businesses is a great way to do that. I mean, every business started out small. So long answer, but that's how we and I and my colleagues address that issue.
Right, and you mentioned the keyword various times, community. Me on my side, I'm building online communities because that's the type of kid I am. I grew up behind a screen. I will bring these communities together physically eventually, but A/B testing a bunch of things online, and I think that communities are really powerful. First, it's insights, right? It's just like brain to brain communication, and you can share data. Hey, that worked for me. Hey, that software is great. You can use it too. Second, it's accountability. So it's like, hey, what are your goals? Here are mine. Any comments? How can you help me reach those? And third,
peer groups
support.
are powerful. Yeah.
Yes, they're very powerful, and they're also like support, right? So it's very hard to start a business, and yeah, sometimes it's emotionally charged. And if you can deal with other CEOs of a similar background to you on a monthly or even weekly basis, I think that can help a lot. So what do you think about communities, and how are you creating these groups of folks that share a common goal, aka get out of poverty and create something perennial? How are you doing that physically?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One, the scale up program, by definition, you're going through school with 6 or 7 other people, and invariably relationships get built, networks get built, and you get communities. The other thing from a public policy that we are driving very hard is a supplier diversity plan for women-owned business, Black and brown businesses. And you see within Philadelphia, for example, I'll give you a good example at Drexel. We have a very, very specific goal. Julie Jones, who's the vice president of procurement, she goes out and she meets with communities. There is coaching, there's education, there's access to, again, what I call barrier breakers. And, they are actively working in the community to identify suppliers. Because look, what does every business need? You need revenue, you need customers. And these very large organizations have a staggering spend. And if they can consciously allocate that to startups and small businesses, the ecosystem starts to thrive. There's huge compliance barriers. Some of them are really stupid. So, you've got to work your way through that. But, by having mentorships and access to skill and talent and funding, again, we're working with, a number of the large banks. And this is not just here in Philadelphia. This is going on all over the country. There's, I think, a rising tide of awareness that if we don't deal with poverty, it will consume us as a society. And the last thing we want to do is let it get to the point where there's social unrest between the haves and the have-nots. And it's not the billionaires versus the thing. It's that body of the population that lives below a living wage that needs to be given the ability to rise up. And I don't believe a handout's the way to do that. I believe we ought to, as wealthy a nation as we are in the U.S., we ought to be able to create businesses, create jobs. Frankly, it's why I think the infrastructure bill was well conceived. I think none of those things are perfect. There's going to be rip off and waste. I mean, it happens. But what we need to do is create living wage jobs and then provide access to opportunities for people who historically haven't been given those. That is the way you move the needle. And if you can train Black and brown businesses, data shows overwhelmingly they're likely to hire from their own neighborhoods. And what's my commitment as CEO of a company to diversity in the hire? Right now I could hire 30 Generac electrical technicians. I can't find them. So what are we working with trade schools to make sure there's a pipeline? How do we educate people that the trades are a very, very viable, a good electrical tech can make 130 a year with benefits and vacations and retirement, right? But I don't need a college educated person. I'm not knocking college education, but technical training, technical education is another pathway. And we've got to, you talk about your internet deal. Who are the guys who stretch the wire? Who are the guys that maintain it? Men and women. So that's kind of my view of that issue.
Let's talk about like solidified brains vs younger brains, young folks of like 5, 6, 7 years old. I think it's really hard to change a brain that's been educated in some way. If my parents taught me to never look for more and be satisfied with what I have, and they've taught me a bunch of things that are not going to make me advance in life, my mind is harder to change. I do think that if we educate younger folks that have a fresh mind and start from scratch and don't have an overloaded brain with solidified neuronal connections, I think there can be a broader impact. Do you agree with this? And how are you helping the youth to adopt new mindset that can be conductive to perennial wealth?
Well, I'm going to come at it slightly way different. We run 850 kids throughout a school time. We go through K through 6th grade. We run a STEM enrichment program, but we also run a program that's called social and emotional learning, which gives young people early enough the skills to be curious, social interaction, the respect for the power of collaboration, the respect for differences. Dorothy Morelli out of Penn State is really the leading expert nationally in this. We are blessed to be able to be working directly with her. And I will tell you, I've been able to track, we have a learning and evaluation group, so we track the data. We know the kids who have gone through 4 or 5 years of that curriculum downstream have a radically different trajectory. So this notion, you're spot on, Charles, this early childhood education is incredibly important, not just in the fundamental skills. And STEAM, by the way, is STEM plus the arts, is absolutely a vital enrichment, particularly in the math and the science. And the social and emotional learning skills and what I call curiosity skills, and what I call believe in yourself skills and believe in how you treat people, the power of collaboration. Those are lacking in many, many, many situations that these young kids are coming up through. So it's not a substitute for parenting, but it is certainly a tool that I've seen just have incredible power. And frankly, it's something that I'm vigorously supporting, that a social and emotional learning curriculum at that early age is a huge difference maker. We're trying to understand, is there an online way to deliver that education? And what you realize is you really need that human interaction in a group to have it be effective. So there's a case where I'm not sure technology is the way to deliver. And like many things, I think a blend of technology and in person is really where we got to go with the whole educational delivery issue. So we're very much in alignment on that, and that's how we are delivering those skills at a young age. To be curious and to believe that there's with a little bit of application of just to be exposed what the world looks like and is possible, lights these kids up.
Talking about youth, I see a pervasive trend, which is like phones and app that just zombify kids, like TikTok and so forth. I didn't grow up that different on my end. It was video games in my time, and that certainly zombified the part of my brain. And I'm not sure if long-term kids can somewhat get out of that, because I certainly got out of many addictive technologies, quote unquote, whether we're talking about video games, whether we're talking about porn, whether we're talking about alcohol. I had a privileged background. My parents, obviously both Caucasian, plus middle, almost upper class in Canada. So I was really protected, and they let me do whatever I could. And I was swimming in a safe environment, right? Like Canada, there's, south of Montreal, there's not much crime going on in there. So I think that was a good strategy in my end. And in video games, I got out of, my parents were not in accordance with that, me spending 40 hours a week playing World of Warcraft in 2005, I think, or 6. But I got out of them. I'm not sure how precisely. I'm not sure if books had positive influence on me, but I can certainly see that putting a phone or a tablet in the hands of a very young kid and having that kid spend multiple hours just doom scrolling, and getting serotonin shot must not create a brain that is efficient to work and integrate the job market, or certainly try to have a positive impact on society, which I think we should strive for. So what do you have to say on these trends, and how could we remedy to this?
Yeah, I'm a fan of limiting screen time for younger kids. I think there's great value in one-on-one direct interaction with your buddies. I think playtime, I think, look, my life changed in COVID with Zoom. I look at, when I was an executive with IBM, I think nothing of getting on a plane and flying to the West Coast for a 3-hour meeting. That's terrible for the environment, wear and tear on me. It costs company a lot. And so, what we're doing here is, it's amazing. I'm sitting on my porch in New Hope. You're somewhere in Mexico, undisclosed location, no doubt. And,
Oaxaca.
we're able to have a conversation and exchange, opinions and learnings. That's all for the good. But a kid who has never, experienced nature, who, doesn't go out to the playground. Physical exercise has an incredible impact on the brain and the endorphins and all the things that works. We know that. So, one of the tragedies of poverty is, where's safe playtime? Where do kids get exposed to that? And what really drives me nuts is on the privileged side, kids are sitting on their butt, on the couch playing games, and I'm going to sound like, an old cranky old man, but, it's important that human interaction, human experiences, team building, real team building, occurs, as kids go off to school, they go off to the workplace. And again, that's why this social and emotional learning curriculum, which I could argue is, a flavor of really good parenting, is I think really, really important. Now, do I think technology and being competent with technology and comfortable with technology and using it, that's the wave of the future. I haven't quite figured out AI yet and where it's going to go. I think a lot of us my age could say that, but I'm really excited about the possibility. I'm in my car and I say, "Hey, Google, take me to XYZ," and all of a sudden, boom, it pops up. I mean, I'm all for that. But I just think it's like many things, Charles. There's got to be a balance, and where is the discipline for balance in the system? And I don't necessarily think that should be the government. I don't necessarily. I do think schools can be part of that, but I certainly think, family structures, parents, and I'm very comfortable with non-traditional families. So, but the act of parenting doesn't necessarily need to be, defined in the traditional way, but the act of an adult interacting with a young person and being involved is huge. I mean, every child is one involved adult away from success. Not my quote, but one that I really, really believe in. And so, where is the role of an adult in a child's life? And maybe it's a teacher, maybe it, hopefully it's a parent. But I don't think it's an iPad.
Yeah, definitely not. Oof, I'm hearing myself talk. Okay. I just think it's very hard to get out of I won't call it the hole again, but let me give you this as an example. I'll call it just brain wiring, right? And firing serotonin and all this brain cocktail of chemicals when to put you in the right direction. Nowadays, like my alarm sounds off at 5:45 and I can remember forever just like not being able to get up at that time back in the days and snoozing, so and now I'm going to run with the dogs in the morning. My dog is right here next to me. I'm still training him, and that used to be impossible for me back in days. Get up at that time, do exercise, and that's just because I'm conditioning my brain. But I'm
There you go.
there you go. That's a nice one. He's sleeping now, so let's I won't pick him up. But I think it takes so many micro efforts and the intersection of so many sciences, quote unquote, or excelling in many life areas in my life: diet, sport, mindset, business, wealth. And I'm a fairly performing individual and pretty obsessed. I'm aligned for this, and it's basically like, how can I help someone reproduce the same? That's the question that is going through my mind, especially when they're set up for failure, if there's addictions in their life and so forth. So sometimes I'm like, I'm not sure where to start. I'm obsessed with AI, with technology, education and books, and I'm really big and fat on mindset, and just first reaching to these kids and audiences and probably providing some kind of AI support is eventually what I would love to do for free, right? I'm a huge advocate of working from your computer. I know that we need these physical workers, and I know that AI will be way slower in deploying bots that will actually work in physical stuff. But for example, in Mexico here, a bunch of people want to cross the border. They think that it will save their life, and sometimes it does, but it's super dangerous. And when they get in the US, well, some people don't want them there, right? Like you've seen the Trump agenda and so forth. So I'm like, why not stay here, open your laptop, start a business? But easier said than done. Do they have Wi-Fi? Do they have the cash to buy a computer? So I'm just unsure where to start sometimes. So knowing my set of skills and abilities, where do you think I should start to start some kind of nonprofit and make an impact out there in the world, by the way, not just like in one spot in the world, but starting with Mexico?
Well, the advice I get to many nonprofits is, what is the impact that you want to achieve? What does success look like?
Would
And
be
then,
a million. That's probably way too high. Let's start with let's start very local, right? So create part-time on tech entrepreneurs, create 1,000 part-time tech entrepreneurs in the city of Oaxaca, Mexico. I'd probably have to buy them laptops, hop on Zoom calls every now and then with them. That would be a start, I guess.
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, it's like any successful business, and I'm going to have to jump off here in a couple of minutes, but the create a business plan, create a business plan, a strategic plan around, I'm a big mission, vision, values. What's the mission? What is it that you do? Vision, what does it look like when it's right? Oh, there you go. And then, what are the values that you want to have guide you? What's the impact? Who's your target audience? And what are the necessary steps? It's kind of right out of business school, to be honest with you. One of the fun things I've found with nonprofits is the combination of business mind and really good professionals is probably the right model. And you execute the plan and you start small and you scale. And then the other thing is, I would tell you, my advice is launch at 80%, measure and tune.
Right. Well, thank you for this, David.
A lot of people get tied up in trying to have the perfect idea. Yeah, I would tell you just, launch at 80%, measure and tune. And the other thing is, your customers are the people you're serving. It's probably a good idea to ask them, what do they need, rather than what you think they need. One of the most powerful things in social work is we think we know the answer. Most of the folks I've had that I've worked with in poverty will absolutely tell you what they need. And so a community survey, an individual survey, an assessment of where the pain is that you can fix is really the fundamental first step. I see a lot of agencies that come in with preconceived notions and they have zero impact. So that would be my core advice.
It's really good advice. Yeah, I think I'd bring the startup mindset to nonprofits, and I'd constantly experiment. I love the expression 100 experiments, 3 success, because that's like your probability of succeeding out there. And if you can scale that, then even better. So David, thanks a lot for the value you've added today. You enlightened me on a bunch of topics and reinforce some of my points there. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, the blog is www.themightyBootsblog.com. And ECS is www.ecsphilly.org. And my successor and the team there, our brain science-based program, ironically, is called Mindset. So I mean, there's a lot of information there. The community resource center is described there. But those would be the 2 places. I write and blog about, the issues that I worry about with the environment and the community. Sometimes I write about the dog. So it's all good. But no, I enjoyed the chat and look forward to actually matching notes with some of the other folks that you've interviewed. So let me know when we go live, and I'll figure out why there's a spike in the blog. So,
well, thanks for that. That was David Griffith for CEO WisdomPodcast.com, and I am Charles Cormier, host. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to podcast, go to podfire.com.